Several unusually severe cases of mononucleosis have developed among students from 3 local high schools. Mono, often referred to as the kissing disease, is caused by fairly common strains of Epstein-Barr virus or cytomegalovirus, and has symptoms such as extended fever, fatigue, and sore throat. However, the current cases have stricken students severely, leading to several hospitalizations. Scientists from the National Laboratory for Biotechnology and Bioinformatics are working to identify the new viral strain. School and health officials worry that without accurate diagnoses, they will be forced to close schools throughout the district. For WMDT, I'm Sal Mania.
Bridge interface helps you set up and organize your tubes for PCR, and provides access to virus samples and master mixes. At the top of the interface are two boxes. The left one lists viruses you have discovered, and the right one lists master mixes. Click and drag clean PCR tubes into the interface slots. With your pipetter equipped, click on a virus name to fill the pipetter with a sample of that virus. Then click on a PCR tube in the interface to transfer the contents. Each column correlates to a different kind of PCR sample. If you place a sample in the wrong column, a warning will appear. You can click on a primer name in the right-hand box to fill the pipetter with master mix. Once mix has been added to a tube, the title of that tube's row changes to match the virus primer in the mix. You should only use one type of master mix per row, otherwise a conflict warning will appear. The master mix determines the virus you are testing for, so any virus samples used will need to match the master mix primers in that row. When you are finished setting up all of your tubes, click the Remove All button to quickly add them back to your inventory.
WMBT, your source for breaking news, brings you an exclusive report from County General Hospital. Two patients who recently returned from travels in sub-Saharan Africa are suffering from severe cases of encephalitis. Encephalitis can produce symptoms including swelling of the brain, hallucinations, and seizures. The cause of these illnesses has not been identified, but experts suspect a virus that the patients may have contracted while in Africa. These patients have been isolated, but health officials worry that the virus may have already spread. Stay tuned to WMBT for the latest on this developing story. Sharon Nettles